I had shared a video of some poor Muslim kids, who were in public, filmed by someone, and it was child abuse, and they were made to pee on the poster of the former BJP spokesperson.
If you want to disrupt law and order, you need to face the consequences for your action.
Look at what has Rana Ayub's thing been. She's like the queen of vulture activism. Currently, as I speak, she's chilling out in Kerala in a luxury hotel. They have a very simple modus operandi. First, their target audience, they ghettoize their minds. They make them believe that they have an enemy. Then they play the messiah. Then they stoke up their passions. Then the person goes for clashes. Then when the person dies, then they again use that against the opponent.
I've become like this point person these days for anybody who's suspended from Twitter, and they message me saying that hey, my Twitter account is gone, or I noticed that because people like you're very active on Twitter, and suddenly one day not seeing your tweets, it's like not getting your food every day. So वो रोजी रोटी जब नहीं मिलता है ना, so you start missing something.
Right.
So, when are Amna and Zeba going to face the treatment is what the nation is asking today. No, but the entire saga, how it happened, guys, especially Khalid, because usually there is a notice, there is a particular, complaint which is raised, sometimes on reasonable grounds. Where you may have violated certain policies of a company. And at the end of the day, let's acknowledge for what it is. Twitter is a private company and they are entitled to certain rules. But what happened with you is really unfair. So could you take us through the entire saga, what happened? And finally, it's been restored. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, so it was a weird last 24 hours, storm, Twitter storm in the internet. I woke up on a Sunday morning, and on my Facebook Messenger, I had a reader who just sent me the screenshot. He's like, "Sir, what is this?" So I thought, it's one of those pranks. Is that you in the video? I was like, okay, whatever. And then I had my first. I was playing with my kids, and then I logged on to my Twitter. And it just said you're permanently suspended because you've broken this big rule and all that. And along with that, it said ki you can never ever make another account. So I was like, oh my god, like ye to kuch zyada hi ho gaya. And so first person I informed was my YouTube partner Amna. So she was like, she got damn emotional. She's like, what is this? These guys don't want voices, stuff and all, and this is the cost of it. So she made a tweet, and then she let people know. It was very well received, and there were some very very influential handles who picked that up. And by evening, Amna was just constantly sending me their messages of solidarity, and everyone was there, and there were some film celebs. I was pleasantly surprised. There was Ranveer Shori who had tweeted about it, and there's also Kanchan Gupta, who's at such a top position, in the Indian ministry. So that was pretty heartwarming. And then, of course, there was everyone, and I was very, very humbled. And then suddenly, what happened is that in the night, Amna said, "Ki Are, there was a thread, there's a tag, or there's a Twitter thread also running. I stand with Khalid Baig." So that went into a bit of a, what do you call that? I mean, the topics trending and all that for some time. And people were very furious, and I was getting messages right, left, center. So part of it, I mean, of course, I hope my readers don't kill me. So this part of it was like, okay, I got a few days rest now, maybe permanent rest from it.
Definitely, it must have been like a detox. But when you heard permanent suspension, you somebody like me, I would have given up all hopes. If I'm permanently suspended, there is no hope for appealing. But then you actually did that, and it did work. Were you surprised?
Yeah, it was a very small thing they gave me, ki likho ki you want to appeal against it. I said yeah. I had no hopes, and the other thing was double whammy. I was like, after this you can't create any account. So it's not like I was too flustered about that. And then, of course, throughout the day, I understood what must have happened, and my analysis was correct, which I'll later come to, that what the whole saga was. And then in the evening, I don't know, because of so much of outpour and some top handles, flagging it, I don't know what happened, who was influenced at the top position in India or abroad, that suddenly in the night, Amna was like, "Arey, your account's showing again." Then I was like, "I'll check it up in the morning again." So they said, then they gave me an option. Then when I was checking my Twitter, they said, you just have to tell us that you have to agree that whether it was intentional or unintentional, you didn't want to do this. So this is what had happened. I had shared a video of some poor Muslim kids, who were in public, filmed by someone, and it was child abuse, and they were made to pee on the poster of the former BJP spokesperson. And I clearly tagged Zubair because since he's been the, instigator of all this, which has snowballed into such tense things for India, and tension between communities, and it's on a tinderbox. And God forbid anything happens, it can, go into major riots. We already saw some rioting. So what I understand is they were waiting for that opportunity. So I tagged Zubair, I shamed him. I said, see, this is what it has come down to, and this is not what religion teaches, and this is not even what, in a civil society. So I understand what he must have done. These minions that he has on internet, and who just on his call mass report, they must have mass reported it under child sensitivity, child abuse. Ironic that I was flagging child abuse and that was being shown as he's, indulging in the same. And then Twitter algorithm, and again, what Musk and a lot of us are fighting for, are very opaque, and there are no nuances and all that. So I don't blame Twitter per se. I mean, a part of it, yes, because you can't pick up the nuances, but it's also you have to understand how committed these pan-nationalistic ecosystems are, where they know how to game the system. Like if 1,000 of us reported that Khalid Baig has gone for child abuse, then the algorithm picks it up as such, oh my God, this is the dangerous account, suspend him and also ensure he never comes back. Then, of course, there was the collective will of the people, which I'm very humbled. And then somehow it just got restored. And yeah, that's it. So since morning, people have been welcoming me. And also why this is happening is there's a reason. This disruption that Twitter is used by, anti-national forces, which have these pan-nationalistic thing. You can already see what they were trying to do in the last last 2 weeks, where they want to set the country on fire. Suddenly, when they saw that there is this now first time they're seeing this resistance by at least 20, 25 popular handles, Indian Muslim handles, who were speaking for peace, who were speaking for moderation, who were saying that, don't go into rioting, take the legal case and all. That is what started perturbing them, likes of me, likes of Zeba, likes of Amana, likes of Umar, likes of Tahir Anwar, many, there's, I forget the name, Zach Tanvir from Saudi Arabia, patriotic, rational, secular Indian Muslims, and, Zafar Islam and many like that. So what happened was that, okay, fine, now we've got the chance, because these guys come in front of the agenda, they're not helping us, light the country on fire. And I think that's what they did. But yeah, surprise, surprise, there I am again. So I don't know when they'll again, ban me, or maybe before that Musk takes over. But just goes on to show you how dedicated they are. And also to our side, the nationalist side, we also need to understand that how much we also need to have that singularity of thought while protecting India and, its peace and harmony. How dedicated they are, we need to be one notch above, So if it's our men in uniform who are guarding us from the external enemies, if within the country, it's us who need to play that role and, constantly ensure that vigilance.
Yeah. No, I think you bring up a very important point. This is something that I was coming towards. Essentially, I think you've united people like you, Puneet Sahani, who've actually had to sacrifice a lot of the identity that you gained on Twitter as a result of these mass reportings that are done. I think has somehow united the ecosystem, because there is a lot of fragmentation within the so-called center-right ecosystem, which I believe everybody would agree to. But thanks for the introduction and vote of thanks that you gave. But a huge shout out to everybody who actually stood up for you. And I think it was very heartwarming over the last 2 days, because you missed a lot of the behind the scenes, but there was incredible amount of support for people like you and Puneet Sani, who's gotten suspended from Twitter. Khalid, this brings me to a very important point. I think there is a new narrative in town, and essentially the Lutyens, the legacy media, is trying to bring this term up Rather, it's a slur called Sarkari Musalman, and that is being utilized today. Zeba, when you actually heard about this, what ran through your mind? And the characterization and the assassination of Indian Muslims who are patriotic in terms of their character, uh, that is very demotivating to people who are actually trying to voice their opinions out.
Yeah, I mean, even today in Twitter, one of like my followers asked, like, what does it feel when you are voicing and you are given tags and trolled? One of them being Sarkari Muslim. So, like, you're not paid by the government to support your country or to have nationalistic belief. It comes all together and culminates from all your, it's a lot of courage, effort, and a lot of thing goes on when you come out and speak. It takes a lot of guts to come outside and speak. Not you are not only fighting the evils, but you're also fighting for within your own community. So yeah, it's like initially it hurts a lot, but it's fine until and unless you have a platform where you have a sizable community, sizable amount of listeners to help you out. And yeah.
But have you guys actually felt that you don't have enough support or you're being somehow pigeonholed by a few people because you do not subscribe to the popular view that many other people would force you to subscribe to?
No, I'll start with the Sarkari Muslim jibe is not a new one. It's a pretty old one. It's been there since the very partition and independence of India in 47. Any Muslim who has been overtly patriotic, which is, by the way, the least you have to be, whether you're a Muslim, Hindu, Christian, Sikh, whatever, being patriotic is like the least thing. It's not even there like, oh my God, I'm patriotic, and suddenly like, oh my God, he's patriotic. Oh, let's collect him as a trophy. That's the least basic decency you would have for a civilization like this or any other country. For that matter of fact, then they say that there is this honor between men in uniform. What they mean is when it's the Indian army guy or the Pakistani army guy, at least that guy is being nationalistic and patriotic to his own country. Imagine he's being patriotic to such an idea, which is so divisive and which has actually, only the results have been destructive. So, of course, in this case, you need to be even more. So that jibe is there. I mean, they haven't even spared people like, Padma Vibhushan Maulana Wahiduddin Khan. They used to call him a Sarkari Muslim because he used to speak for peace. So imagine he's speaking for peace and moderation and, a dialogue between communities. So it doesn't bother. There's a brilliant article written by Najmul Huda, who's again a very rational, patriotic voice. And I guess he's an IPS officer, where he's spoken about how it's this whole terminology comes from the whole two nation, Muslim League theory, and that you ultimately, if I always taught them when they say Sarkari Muslim, I'm like, you're basically then not a you're not a Indian Muslim that way. Your allegiance lies outside this. Then they get very riled up. I'm like, yeah, of course, our allegiance is going to be to our country. So one point is that. Second, initially when I started on social media, I did feel they were not enough. But man, whether it's on our show, our bi-weekly show, which Amna and me run on India This Week by Amna and Khalid on YouTube, or many other shows, it's so nice to see now. I mean, I'm sure even Zeba can vouch for it. We now at least see 25, 50 of them very vocal. And the way they're going against these Islamists and communists, fabulous, with a lot of culture, with a lot of respect, with a lot of wit, with some amazing sarcasm, a lot of knowledge. And now suddenly the numbers seem, internet's a very beautiful thing. So those numbers are there. And to have people like Puneet Sahani who are through their Sikh identity tackling the extremism there, who's doing an incredible job, and he's a encyclopedia on Sikhism, and he is the true moderate patriot Sikh. So now beautifully you're seeing these alliances, which have come up, and the nationalistic ecosystem definitely now you can see a lot of Muslim names. They of course were Hindu names, but of course now at least the Hindus also realizing that. Those Hindus with Hindu names who are a part of nationalistic and how they work as decoys, so they're not necessarily nationalistic. And in both camps, on a philosophical beauty level, you see, more or less. I mean, if you look at the Indian Army, which is symbolic of the guardians of this idea of India, it is people across communities, right? And so if you look at that and you interpolate that with the nationalists within, you know, you will see there are people from all communities. What the beautiful part is that even the other side, the secessionists, the evil anti-national forces, the pan-national, even they have people from all faiths. So like of course, in varying degrees, from some communities more, from some less. So it's a very interesting game for a youngster who wants to understand that ultimately it is, yes, it is to a certain point, it is about clash of civilizations, it is about having honest dialogues. But when it comes to nation, the traitor can be across communities and the patriot can be across communities, and it is we are happy that we are somewhere in the initial stages of building that up, where today it's very nice to have that kind of people around you. So no, I think this is the best time to, I mean, it was always the best time to be a patriot towards a great civilization like India, which is home to 8 major world religions, which no other country is to. But now, no, the numbers are there. I mean, I could see it from the outpour, I have, and I also see a small. I mean, I need to be intellectually honest. Small but significant section of Muslim voices who now come out and ask support as well. So, I mean, I just named 8, 10. There are many like that. So, a great time.
Yeah.
The whole bonding.
I think growing up, a lot of us in school, we were looking up to people like Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. And in the recent times, I think people like Arif Mohammad Khan
Arif Mohammad Khan, yes,
has really inspired a lot of us, irrespective of which religion you belong to or which ideology you subscribe to.
Absolutely.
But Khalid, since we are actually being intellectually honest, or maybe Zeba can come in on this,
Sure.
there is an element of politicization. Maybe that has a positive reinforcement or a negative one. That can be completely debatable. At the end of the day, there are certain political appointees which the BJP might have appointed at a certain point, keeping certain calculations in mind. But at the end of the day, do you think they are actually making that sort of an impact? Because obviously today we have a lot of voices like yours which are being empowered. But if you have to make this cause a more genuine one, how do you, as Indian Muslims who are extremely patriotic, who have certain civilizational ethos, uh, make a particular roadmap in order to breach that acceptability area even further?
See, as Khalid ji mentioned, that it's not like a very small community. Now it's coming up. So I also follow the politics. So there are also Shehzad ji who is pointing out a lot of things. So there people, mostly the youth, needs a fuel or a push that he's saying. I think he's correct, or she's saying that might she's making a point. So you just need locally. Today even I was talking with one of my friends that you need most rather than having big leaders, you need local leaders, local people to look up to regionally, to come and culminate into a rather bigger force. So I think like the things that we are doing, we are speaking up. There are a lot of people, most of my friends who were apolitical, they also now come and join in to the discourse. So I think like the more you speak up, the more you have other people who join in to make it a bigger community. So I think it will work out well.
And the other trend that I observed in the last couple of weeks was that generally the narrative that the left in India would set was, oh, look at America, they're actually mocking you. You have a very terrible human rights record in Kashmir and you do terrible things to Muslims in India. That was the narrative for the last 20, 30, 40 years. But now all of a sudden with the recent developments, you see the narrative of, look at the countries who do not have absolutely any human rights at all, even they are mocking you. So this comparison of us having to get that certain validation from the West or now the Middle East has become ridiculous, don't you think, Khalid?
Yeah, you see, there lies a lot of factors, like growing up in one of India's top cities in Pune, and studying in one of the best Christian missionary schools. The other aspect, what we don't talk much about, is how a lot of our thoughts also which get developed, and I'm not saying it's intentional or there's some major project behind it. It's just the way the things flow. Is that we always are made to feel that the aspirational value system, and we've already had our colonized mindsets, and this education system only puts another layer of Fevicol on it. So you're like, oh, look at America. I was just telling today only someone, and I was like, it's weird, and it's always been it infuriates me, this whole Gora walking and Indians being in subservience, walking to them and saying, "Sir, this is the." I'm not saying we don't want to be good guests, but you got to be equal, right? But what has changed in the last 2 years? That confidence is also coming. You see it from the statements of the External Affairs Minister, Dr. S.J. Shankar. You want to be treated as an equal on that table. Yes, that humility will be, that humbleness would be there of being one of world's oldest civilizations, but that baggage is also going. You notice another thing, is that, are you seeing lately in the last 5 years, the new heroes, the Rani Rampals, our hockey, women's team captain, and many of them, where are they coming from? They're coming from the tier 2 cities. They're coming from the tier 3 cities. It's that Hindi heartland. It started from Mahendra Singh Dhoni. So that's the confidence. You look at our Olympic star, right? Neeraj Chopra. And I loved it. He told him, in his first interaction that he said, I'm going to speak in Hindi. I'm not comfortable speaking in English, So that churn's also happening. And that's actually unnerving the earlier so-called, lack of a better word, elite affluent, because the new India is fine now. It's confident. It also hits back and tells US, look at your gun shootings, mass shootings and all. So a great time for that kind of churn. You look at, I had once pointed this out. He's a cricketing star, Mohammad Siraj, plays for Royal Challengers Bangalore, represents Indian team. He was speaking in his state Hyderabadi accent, when he speaks, and he's not ashamed about it. And I really like it because it's so fun to listen to that Hyderabadi accent when he speaks, and where's he come from? His father was a rickshaw driver, right? So this new India that's banging on the doors is also betrays this kind of nervousness that the older elite guard doesn't want to give up, because somehow in their growing up, in their worldview, these were people who are like, not that cool, they couldn't hang out with you, they were not that hip and all. So more than the left and right battle there, it's actually India coming up and saying, hey, this is who we are, we'll respect you, but I don't need to speak, fluent English or something else. I'm an Olympic star, speak to me in Hindi because I speak in Hindi. So I think that's happening. And so when these comments come now, I feel very happy on Twitter seeing these youngsters. They just give it back. They're like, oh, yeah, what about your country? You just had some mass shootings, happening there, about the racism there and all that. So I think that rebuttal is also coming, and that's why you see the intolerance brigade feeling intolerant. How dare these, barbarous multitudes speak now back to us? That's intolerant.
I think that was evident with also the boy that was targeted earlier today by a mob, and then later he was arrested for certain comments that he made on Instagram about Prophet Muhammad. Uh, well, I don't know the entire details of the story, but basically he did disagree with the majority, and then he knew that something was going to happen to him, and he actually premonitored that, and that actually ended up happening to him. So I remember, funnily enough, while we were in the earlier days of college when the Modi government had just come to power, initially all of these political commentators, many of whom have now been invalidated and they've lost relevance, were actually saying, at least for comparison's sake, that the BJP does not have a lot of MPs and MLAs belonging to the Muslim community. Now, at least will they allow cricketers, who are Muslim to continue in the Indian cricket team? And that was the amount of ridiculousness that you could actually hear. So, what's your opinion about Indian Muslims being used for representative sake? I think that's more of an insult than it can be of empowerment, because at the end of the day, you're just doing that because you want to appease to a certain community rather than truly empower them by means of governance.
Well, that's the same old two-nation theory being played out. No? It's like you want to keep them in the siege mentality. You want to tell them that you can be represented only by a person of your identity. After having one of the greatest constitutions in which all our religious rights are not only protected but celebrated, in addition to that, there are minority rights, right? So there is nothing more that you need. I mean, for a corporator or for an MLA or for an MP, how he does work in your area should matter. It shouldn't matter whether he comes from your faith. I mean, next argument they could give is that whether he's from a particular sect, then they can say whether he's from a particular subsect, all that thing. So I think that does not matter to at least the tier one urban city Muslim, youth who want to move ahead and are, doing well. Reminds me again, we just had a world boxing champion in Nikat Zareen, Muslim woman from Hyderabad, right? So a lot of great stuff happening there. So this is all to feel, it's that same thing what the communist Islamist lobby do. Once you are able to make someone believe that he's under threat and you are the messiah, then you can make the person do anything. Like, look at what has Rana Ayub's thing been. She's like the queen of vulture activism. Currently, as I speak, she's chilling out in Kerala in a like luxury, holiday. No one would have had that grudge against her. But look at the irony. At the same time, on Twitter, she goes within a minute. She feeds that toxic victimhood. She uses the deaths of poor Muslim kids. She prays, and says, see what happened. Again, paints that also as state atrocity. The Muslim kid dies. He wouldn't even ever know her name. She wouldn't know how his mother's life is destroyed. And she's prepped him up for it by, constantly telling him they're against you. And herself, she's having a great time. And that's the same way with communists also who are Hindus, the same with her partners and all. So what they do, they have a very simple modus operandi. First, their target audience, they ghettoize their minds. They make them believe that, they have an enemy. Then they play the messiah. Then they stoke up their passions. Then the person goes for clashes. Then when the person dies, then they again use that against the opponent. And themselves, they lead great lives, travel business class, which I think 0.1% of Indians can. And this is what is representing. But what right now is really, really rattled them is this avalanche of 20-25 Indian Muslims on Twitter every hour, taking them on and rebutting them. If it's not me, then it's Zeba. If it's not Zeba, then Umar. If not Umar, then Amina. If not Amina, Tahir. If not Tahir, Zafar Islam. If not Zafar Islam, Atif Iqbal. And they're like, oh my God, now can we get these guys' accounts shut? So that's happening. But we are not going to back down. We are going to ensure that we live by what we believe, which is that poor Muslim kid deserves the same shot at life as our kids do, which of course Rana and gang don't believe in. Otherwise, the industry wouldn't work. But that's it. That challenge will be taken every day, whether they ban our accounts or not.
Well, we actually encourage and salute the spirit with which all of you work towards the patriotic cause. But Zeba, since you're also into academics these days, something like this, an environment like this, which enables voices like yours and Khalid and Amna's, wasn't actually possible just a few years ago, even with Modi in power, especially if you recall the entire JNU episode that happened and then subsequent protests that happened. There were Muslim activists who were completely hardlining the common Muslim students that were either in JNU or Jadavpur. So how did you actually find that courage to actually speak out? And even today, is it something that you find difficult, or has it been relatively okay?
See, it depends on the university. So the university from which I am pursuing, so it's a private university, but we have a lot of left liberal stuff going on. So we have red reading circles. So we also have the Indic Wig circle to give them back. So we have this discourse, but then we also are friends, right? So it depends on how you are. There are lefty professors. We also have right-leaning professors. We have conservative society. They have their communist society. So we have our rallies and all those stuff. But yeah, it wouldn't have been possible if I was a part of another university. But we are encouraged to speak up, and it's we had a lot of trouble to pitch in our to go ahead with a conservative society or right-leaning society or Indic society, but we had a lot of mentors and seniors and us battling here and there and getting the administration to deal with it. And then so it wouldn't have been possible if we were a small community in our university. So it's going on well until now. We are not debarred yet.
Right. But that's such an oxymoron, progressive Muslims starting up a conservative society. Anyway, if the labels these days of late, especially because of Twitter activism, have gotten really confusing, and people take offense to anything at all. But coming back to what Khalid was saying earlier, Khalid, I think you were also hinting at the lack of a political representation for Muslims in India today, because the Congress and a few other regional parties actually held that particular vote bank. They ghettoized them, they cultivated them as a vote bank, they fed that fear, like you said, for many years. But today you see that slowly disintegrating and fragmenting. So, where do you see this actually progressing as situations like these unfold?
I don't know, could go either way. Of course, with the recent events or whatever has been passed in the past done with the anti-CA violent rioting, which led to the Delhi riots, and there was further polarization. Then the farm protests where the government just catapulted and they should have not given it. Two ways. Either, it diffuses and then just behaves like any other entity where the votes go across political parties. But of course, OAC wouldn't want that to happen, and hence, he would want to play the Messiah and the, modern day, not modern day. I mean, the way he goes about it, it feels like age-old day leader. But there could be a silver lining in all this, because you could see that the reality of a certain civilizational churn, it's not that it's going to go back. That academic landscape, that intellectual landscape is only going to only going to increase and get entrenched, right? So that is irreversible. So maybe through all these tough battles that are happening at various fronts, there could actually be a truth and reconciliation which could come in. Like, we are trying our best in that case, because that overall helps in society to work. You can't brush topics under the carpet, and then that will someday or the other come up. So I think two ways of looking at it, but I'm more positive about it, because this whole bogey has been. I was a victim of it when I was a teenager, and they would say after 2002, and of course there too they marauded the facts and blurred so many things and obfuscated so many things, and then later you read counters to all that. But then that bogey thing, they've been running for 20 years now, right? And things have only actually improved. The data-wise, you can't deny facts. The number of riots which have happened in the last 8 years are much more lesser than what were there before. And touch wood, terror attacks in non-conflict zones of India have been zero, and I hope that stays for the next thousands of years. So overall, people are happier. Corruption levels are down. I think it's also because there's not much you have against the current leader. So you have to constantly come up with anything and everything, even if it's so desperate that it leads to something where you are, trying to light fire. But overall, like I had said this in Abhinav Prakash's podcast also, the number of scholarships which Muslim youths have got in the last 8 years is huge. It's around 3 CR, I guess, 3 CR. Sorry, I wouldn't want to quote the figure. I'm not sure about it, but it was more than, what was there. So I think it's fine. I see them doing really well in all. Like I just spoke about Nikat Zareen, and there are many such examples.
Yeah, Arun Jaitley
Why
had a
not
very
only
good
them,
term
other
to
communities as well. So I think less politics and more nation building, and hopefully people are also seeing through, once they saw the anti-CA, what they tried to do, the communist Islamist ecosystem, what they tried to do then with the tying up with Khalistanis in the farm protests, what they were trying to do now, after the issue was tried to, solved and all. So I think people also realize. So, but you never know, in the quest for power, people have done some very, very dangerous things. So one just hopes that the battle is taken ideologically, and not that at the quest of power you're ready to, in fighting the leader, wanting to say now we go against India.
Absolutely.
That would be...
And I think Arun Jaitley had a very good term for this. He called them compulsive contrarians, basically people who wanted to oppose anything and everything for the sake of politics. Another interesting trend that I observe is that first there was the talk of uniform civil code key. Everybody has to have the same law and everybody face the same law. There is some sort of uniformity in which under we all fall together. But now, because of the polarization that you see, I have seen a lot of Hindu groups actually calling for Hindu personal law board. So the polarization is taking in a different way. So sometimes the impact of Islamic reforms actually taking a halt can have a direct impact on how the Hindu society also progresses.
Zeba, you can take that.
I have no response.
I didn't know who to ask, so I just blanked out there. But basically, this is what I have observed. The trends of the communal trends are actually changing slowly, and obviously, the root cause of all of this is that sort of appeasement. But without going deeper into that, and since we're also running out of time, is what would your message to a lot of silent voices who may be silently admiring a lot of people like you be, and ultimately, what does it take, that it took you to come out and speak their minds out and actually advocate for more progressive policies in the future?
Can I go first?
Yeah,
Yeah, please.
See, I think one of the biggest takeaways and concerns with all the news that is happening is how people are not afraid of taking law and order into their hands and disrupt normal life and functioning. This is not something that has to be dealt, it has to be dealt appropriately. It's very simple to, if you want to disrupt law and order, you need to face the consequences for your action, irrespective of what or who you are. And law and legality should be equally applicable to all people who hurts, religious sentiments, or you are destroying public property, or doesn't matter which religion you offend to. And as a law student, I'm speaking legally that Article 295A, we have that, exists for a reason in India, as our forefathers knew that such situation can emerge in our country because we as a country is deeply religious and religious society. So however, my greatest concern will be the left liberals who are completely being political and have muddied the waters in terms of how narratives are shaped nowadays. So it's shameful to see such behavior, and with like the recent case of Nupur Sharma also, her case would be taken up judiciary, which would be probed into her comments. However, it is really not cool enough to, threaten her. And there are not even one single feminist who will always cry for, all other purpose, but who has never spoken up about, rape threats or death threats that were given up. So, आप प्रोटेस्ट करिए लेकिन शांति पूर्वक करिए, रहना तो इधर ही है सबको. सो अगर कुछ प्रॉब्लम है तो उसका आप कोर्ट में भी करिए इलाज. Court exists for a reason, and these kind of things shouldn't happen. And women rights bhi abhi selectively you are playing out with political biases. So yeah, it's our own country, and we should deal with it both together in an appropriate manner. And if you want to have discourse, debate, discussion, that could happen in a very proper and a civilized manner.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Khalid's closing words, and then we'll
My closing words, I always tell this to everyone because it's also important not to constantly talk down to people, because sometimes one has always also been a victim of things themselves, like I was to a large extent while growing up. And it's very simple. You read the news, you read on the websites, you see everything. Then ask yourself an honest question. You don't need to even tell that to anyone. That your daily life, of your work, of your colleagues, of your entertainment, of your relationships, how is that? Of your religious freedoms? And you will realize that it's always been incredible, right? Whichever faith you are from. Of course, the credit always goes to the majority of how they want to treat the minority. So then that honest intellectual thing. And then when you will compare it to other countries in the neighborhood, you will realize that you also have to start. You have to take that charge of being honest and disseminating that knowledge amongst your close circle, family, larger, and the community, and saying, "Hey, this is the reality which all of us have. Then let's be honest about it." And little we introspect, and little we speak to the other, and you can make things wonder, magic work, because that's what India is. So I think that is what my message to every youth is: chuck everything, chuck what I'm saying, chuck what anybody's saying, chuck all these Twitter wars, chuck all what you're watching on TV, but just ask yourself that what's your normal life like every day? How many people of how many faiths do you see? What's your religious freedom life? What's your friendship life? How normal is it? How beautiful is it? And then after that, you won't need to ask anybody else anything.
Absolutely. I think that's one good thing about actually studying in university campuses which have that kind of diversity, because it exposes you to multiple worldviews. Like Zeba was saying, because you introduce, you meet new people, you talk to them, you exchange points of views, and then finally you come to your own conclusion. And I think a lot of us, especially since I at least come from a media background, we have that burden of proof upon us to actually read multiple sources and to develop that perspective. And I feel we were also blindfolded for a very long time, because certain portals were not considered authentic enough, because these people wouldn't actually subscribe to that particular worldview. But then slowly working with them, subscribing to them, reading them, fact checking them, at the end of the day, any media portal would eventually make errors, and I don't think anybody would make it intentionally. uh, so barring all of that, that is something that even I took home, a few years ago, and my life has changed ever since. My perspectives have completely changed. The person that I was probably 3 4 years ago, it's a sudden shock for everybody, because in other common terms it would be called ghar wapsi, but that essentially happened a few years ago, and it was a shocker for everyone. So I think
Welcome to the club. Welcome to the club.
thank you for the belated wishes. But this was a fantastic podcast. I could really connect with you guys, and I think this was really inspiring, interesting, and amazing. And I hope we can actually have such sessions in the future. And I hope Amnadi can join us next time.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zeba. Thank you so much, Khalid. More power to people like you. And I'm pretty sure you are going to become very, very important in the process of Islamic reforms and progressive policies in the future. All the very best to the both of you, to whatever you're doing.
Thank you.
Good luck to you too.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, this was a Swarajya conversation. Please do stay tuned and subscribe, because that is the only way we get to know that you actually like our conversations and you're in support of whatever we do. We will try to actually have these intellectually honest conversation as much as possible on a regular basis. Till then, this is your host, Sharan Seti signing off.